Greetings and welcome to Enigmatic. Good morning. I hope this is a good Sunday for you. I hope you are relaxing if you get to relax. I hope you're having a good work day if that's what is on your agenda. I want to go on a little bit of a philosophical diatribe about something that occupies my mind very often, or one of many philosophical ideas that occupies my mind pretty often. And because I'm a moody little shit, it actually kind of drives a little bit of anger. So, the topic is on free will and determinism, and more specifically, how I feel that we are giving away the potential for our free will because of arguments for determinism. So yeah, this is where we're going. I don't even know how I want to get started with this. So determinism is the idea that is predicated on physicalist and materialist philosophies and ideas that based on the idea of cause and effect, that things are somewhat predictable. They're already kind of predetermined because there's already a system of cause and effect in place to determine what's going to happen next, because there's already causes that are happening. And one of the ideas about the generation of how all this started was that there's some initial uncaused cause, right? Which an uncaused cause is a paradox. So, and then free will is the idea that we have some amount of autonomy in the choices that we make. And so if it isn't already apparent, we can see how these two things contradict each other. Because if we as creatures, as beings that seem to think and have minds, or things that we would call minds, but we're made out of matter, and that matter operates off of physical laws, then in some ways we don't have any choice. Everything that we do is predicated on something else that already happened. And the phenomenology of our experience doesn't support this, right? But the argument is there, and the argument has what we would call a certain amount of explanatory power. And that explanatory power also appeals to ideas that already cohere to themselves within our minds. So there's a certain appeal to going along with this argumentation. And don't get me wrong, I understand it, but I understand a lot of different ends of a lot of different things, and I can understand how that's also not necessarily the case. Because in coming to a point to develop an idea of determinism, there are a lot of things that we have to take for granted. And one of those things is, are we sure that we are actually seeing things as they are? Or have we just shifted the nature and the scope of our phenomenology? Such that we have the phenomenology of having free will, but we also have the phenomenology of seeing things in a way that is deterministic. It's almost like switching a lens and then declaring based on the lens switch that something is absolute instead of how something seems. So with determinism, I feel like it seems that there are a lot of things that are predetermined, but there are still a lot of issues with these physicalist ideas as well. So, for example, why can we have an uncaused cause and that's okay? Whereas the main issue that physicalists and materialists want to have with dualism is, how can things that are immaterial or non-physical inform things that are physical and immaterial? I'm not taking sides. My personal perspective on this is that these two ideas come together as a fundamental paradox, that we have certain degrees of free will and we have certain degrees of determinism. So if we consider that the subconscious informs our conscious mind, and our conscious mind is what we are the most aware of, then when we don't check anything in our subconscious, we're kind of like automatons. We're kind of just out here doing whatever based on input output. However, it seems that we are able to substantiate and make changes to ourselves by paying attention to these processes. And so this is another issue that determinism runs into, is that we're talking about something that is very novel and unique relative to everything else that we've experienced in, well, for us in our lives, but in reality. And we've only been able to pin down a very, very small part of reality potentially. And that mystery is consciousness. And so we develop a model in order to try to explain it and to study it. And one of those is through physicalism and materialism. And so people, scientists will want to reduce things to brain processes, and neural firings and things like that. But if I mention a pink elephant and I'm talking about imagining a pink elephant, those synapses don't. They're almost like reflections of the pink elephant. They showed that something was thought in my brain, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that they contain the pink elephant that I am experiencing, right? It might have the code for the elephant, but the code is not the elephant. Just like when I say tree, the word tree is not a tree. We can't mistake the thing for the symbol for the thing, right? And so I bring this up because we try to have physical explanations for consciousness, but our physical explanations for consciousness really seem to be more of reflections of consciousness than anything that adds any explanatory power to it. So we're dancing around a whole lot here, and it's because it's a very in-depth topic. This is something that has been argued over for a very, very long time. And I just find there's a lot of hypocrisy to me, because I already highlighted the main issue with dualism, and it's almost the only issue, and that's how does something non-physical inform something that is physical, right? But then within physicalism and materialism, we have a whole bunch of other issues. So for example, and they're hypocritical. So for example, we have unobserved observables. And these are things that we only see the reflections of. You can't hold gravity, but you can see that there's a thing that is pulling things towards the center of the masses of objects, right? You can't see electromagnetism. You see what we would call its effects, right? And so we can allow those, but we can't allow an unobserved observable that has to do with the mind. I think that's very interesting. And then to go back, we have an uncaused cause. That's a paradox. And, most of the time in science, paradox is a bad thing. So it's why is that okay? To, move a little bit more towards the grander point that I want to make, I think that, one, it's really hard to be able to tell whether or not we've escaped our own phenomenology or not. Even when we, use tools in order to inform us about the world, we haven't gotten rid of our own perceptual apparatus. It's almost like having your glasses on and then using a pair of binoculars. I never took the glasses off, and you kind of need the glasses. That being said, we need our senses, but our senses are limited. We get less than 1% of the acoustic and electromagnetic spectrum to actually experience with our senses. So then we have to default to an instrument. And so we're compounding the kind of scope that we're looking through, right? And this is also interesting because science uses a lot of logic, and you always want to use deductive logic when you can, because that's the only logic that is really going to be guaranteed. It's perfectly binary, but it's not always applicable, right? There's not always there's contexts in which a binary system doesn't work. Also, there's times where the context doesn't give you any guarantees, and that's where inductive reasoning comes in. But with inductive reasoning, by definition, it is never 100% guaranteed. It's what's most likely to be true, so it's probabilistic. This is why I like the word seems a lot, and I just kind of wish that people in science would say oh, well, based on XYZ information and ABC interpretation, it seems that this is most likely to be true, instead of saying this is the case. No. Anyway, back to the logical point I was making. So the more that you compound inductive reasoning, the further away you get from 100% certainty or validity, veracity, soundness. So if I have, you know, information and logical set A, and it is 99% accurate, and then I compound that with, another logical set and information of B, and that's also 99%. When we average those two out, it becomes 98%. So we see as we continue to compound inductive logic, we move further and further away from how sure we want to be, which makes me think of the Delphic maxim, certainty brings insanity. So all this being said, I find determinism to actually be a very dangerous idea, because it's a great way to shrug off and to kind of discard bad things that are happening. Because then you could just say, oh, like, it's just the way it's supposed to be, it's destiny, it's fate. It's like, I don't know why we want to give away like our sense of choice. It seems like we want to give it away, because I think about when people appeal to the ideas of fate and destiny and things like that, or when they say that, there's something that has a plan for them. It's very solipsistic, and then like it's solipsistic in the way that, okay, if there's this plan for you, there's a plan for somebody else that's not awesome, it's maybe fucked up. So why do you get an awesome plan and this other person doesn't, right? What makes you special? Why is your fate awesome and somebody else's fate maybe not quite as awesome? Or there's so many different ways to look at a lot of these things, but I just find it to be very loaded, and it also we sacrifice our sense of choice, in my opinion, to that. Now, at the same time, I do understand that sort of position when it comes to coping and trying to get by in life, right? We have to be able to find a route to acceptance for a lot of things that happen to us, because most things in life happen to us. Our choice comes in how we deal with it. But I think about a lot of, atrocities that have happened over time, and a determinist could just easily say, oh, well, it was predetermined to happen, and in a certain way absolve themselves of having to care. And we get to absolve ourselves from having to care about others when we give this up, especially when we're giving it up and it's still debatable. Like, if you pick a side, then you're picking a bias more than anything else, because there's equal validity and veracity to both of these ideas. One of the reasons why I think that we're looking at an intimity, which is a type of paradox. But yeah, I just find that extremely, extremely loaded. Because then I guess the other thing too is that if everything is predetermined, then we're not actually living life. We're living an illusion of living life. And that might be true, but does our phenomenology really say that? Like, what else substantiates it, right? You can't just like tell me that everything is an illusion and then, okay, well, what's outside the illusion? Like, if we're in the illusion and you're telling me that this is all an illusion, like, how do you know that what you're saying about this being an illusion isn't also an illusion, right? It becomes nested. It's not exempt from itself. But I don't think that anybody wants to be a robot. Anybody wants to be an automaton. But really, if we appeal to determinism, that's kind of what we're saying. We're just input-output machines that are moving off of, or that are operating off of physically predicated laws. It's kind of funny because we talk about laws, and laws are something that are inherently non-physical, right? We talk about physical laws, but for us to even conceptualize it, we have to come up with something that's non-physical, right? When I have an idea, especially if I keep it to myself, that idea remains non-physical. If I share this idea, whether it be verbally or if I put it down on paper, that is not the idea. That is a reflection of the idea. That is the symbol of the idea, so that somebody can be able to pick up the idea themselves. The idea itself is still not going to be physical or material. But again, like, it's hard to, when we're conditioned to think in certain ways and we don't realize that we're conditioned to think in those ways, we have to try to pigeonhole everything and try to shove square pegs in circular holes and circular pegs in square holes. Yeah. There'll probably be a part 2 to this one. But yeah, I didn't want to keep it going too long. But yeah, just some food for thought, some things to think about. I feel a little bit rusty philosophically, so it was good to do this because I didn't look anything up, and I'm trying to really just get my gears going with all of this again, and get comfortable. Sometimes I wonder if this feeling of not being as versed is really just my awareness of how much I don't know. So I need to sit with that. Um, and here's an exercise for you. Grab a piece of paper and grab a pen. Um, Put a dot on the piece of paper. I want you to look at that dot. That dot represents what you know. The piece of paper represents what you know you don't know. Everything outside the piece of paper, everything, that means like even into galaxies we don't even know exist, to the periphery of the universe, if there is a periphery of the universe, everything outside that piece of paper is what you don't know you don't know. Give me a like, give me a subscribe, feel free to share. I don't know why I say feel free to share. Maybe I should just ask nicely. Please share. And be good to you, be good to others. I'll talk to you next time. Take care. Peace.